All right, section 8, lubricating oil system. All right, your engine maintenance manual, number 25C, model 567, engine, third edition, General Motors, locomotives. Engine maintenance manual. All right, section 6, lubricating oil system. The description of the engine lubricated for the combination of the three sets of the systems, the engine lubricating oil system, piston cooling oil pipe system, scavenging oil system. Engine lubricating oil system, the lubrication for the remove of the various parts of the engine and the piston cooling system, supply with the cooling of the pistons and with the lubricating of the piston bearings with the bearing surface of the scavenging oil system serve for the purpose of supplying the other juice system with cooled and filtered oil with taking as the oil drain of the oil pumps and forcing it into through a filter and coolers wherever they flow with the section strainer of the bearing of the supply with the lubricating piston, cooling pump with the parts of the lubricating system pointing with the front of the engine figure 8-1. Unit description: oil pans to figure 1-2 serve for the support of the crankcase and the cursor of the lower part of the engine, rectangular shape of the handhold on each side of the inspection surfacing is for the pump of the engine, lubricating oil with the engine is stop the oil with the now trapped in the filter cooler lines and is drains into the sump. Thus, the scavenging oil suction is built into the oil pan and extended to the sump of the front of the engine line until the scavenging oil in the strainer housing. And it shows your lubricating system components. One, strainer housing, cooler out oil inlet housing. 3, lube strainer hold down crab or filler opening cover lubricating oil section lube and piston cooling pumps, lube piston cooling pumps, lube oil discharge. 8, oil manifold relief valve piston cooling discharge. 10, strainer seal oil supply line. 11, scavenging pump outlet. 12, scavenging oil pump. 13, scavenging oil pump suction line from strainer housing. 14, scavenging suction strainer oil outlet channel. Alright, a bayonet type of oil gauge with the side of the oil with a pan figure 8-2 with its sprung with the show with all oil fits to the low with the fuel level that has and with the number to identify the U of the particular engine. 2, oil strainers over the oil strainer has with a large box cap with aluminum housing mounted on the right side of the engine with the accessory drive with the cover of the figure 8-1 if it isn't contained with the gauge with the depending with the strainer with the more main oil pump supply scavenging oil pump with each pump with the strainers separate the oil inlet discharge for the 2 front fine mesh strainers from mainline lube pump oil in 1 coarse screen of the scavenging pump oil. A3 shove the main oil pump strainer with the roof from the housing, which into the plate with the help with the crab of the hand wheel with the shove went between the hole with each with the strainer with the shield with the top and seal ring. Also with the oil under pressure with the submitted with the groove with the in around each strain with the just below with the seal with the prevent air entry of them with the leaky seal with the portion of the adjacent with the strainer with the open at the bottom separated for the oil inlet with the housing oil entry for the strainer portion with the bottom with the taken up by a pump through the cast through a cast passage in the housing. Or the core scavenging oil pump screen that should be removed with an 8-4 with the screening in place for the area is closed with the flange and gasket top of the screen with held by 3 studs with the nuts located with the large square with the filler opening covered with the inlet opening with the scavenging oil screen with the figure 8-5 and end oil level to maintain with the strainer housing on the bottom of oil overflow open figure 8-5. Excessive overflow accessory drive with housing with a return for the sump with the drain engine or oil is drained with the oil with the strain or housing drained with the oil pan sump through the scavenging pump line with the spring unloaded valve with the located with the case to cast passages between the oil storage line with the suction chain with the must be kept closed except for the drain housing. The valve handle is located under the square filler opening covering the 3 is the scavenging oil pump. The scavenging oil pump figure 8-1 item 12 is mounted as an accessory. So you have your pressure pump strainer with a strainer return spring and filler cover oil passes, and then you have your scavenger pump strainer with a strainer gasket oil strainer holding stud, and then a basket with the strainer hosing oil overflow dish scavenging oil discharge outlet to the pump housing mounting flange scavenging oil suction inlet outlet. Alright, gear covered in line with the left of the camshaft with the driving with the accessory drive gear with the scavenging oil pump with the top of the displacement helical gear tied with the self the rhyming the pumping house with the split transversely easily with the main with the hole with the double shaft with the mated pumping gear with the driving gear with the retain with the pump driver gear shaft with the woodruff key with the idle shaft with the stationary housing by the lack of the screw with the driver gear pump gear road A with the shaft with the bushing pressed into the gear the shaft hat bore the draft shaft turning with the bushing with the press into the pump of the housing bushing are made with the thrust collar for the protrude with the slightly with above the pump by body absorbed through the thrust of the drive gears. Figure 8.6 shows the strainer housing internal with the oil drain patch of the drain lift the turn class closed before refilling. Alright, year 4, your lube oil piston cooling pressure pump. The lube oil piston cooling oil pressure pump is in one housing, figure 8.9 and 8.10 with the two pumps that separate with a division plate with the between the section with the pump housing each for the individual oil inlet discharge opening. The piston cooling pump of the outer end of the has the narrow gears through the lube oil with the pump of the construction of the wide with the cylinder with the scavenging oil of the pump, lube oil and the piston cooling oil pump is mounted with an accessory drive of the gear for the center, figure 8.1, and item 6 for the drive of the accessory drive gear. Lube 5, oil pressure relief valve. The low oil pressure relief valve, figure 8.11, the mounting of the low lube oil crossover manifold with the under accessory gear train cover the left inside of the engine. The cover plate with or easily remove the engine accessory of the valve with inspection adjustment. So if the scavenging pump exploded, then it shows you your scavenging pump, and then the lubricating piston cooling pump. The purpose of the valve is the limit of the maximum pressure for the lube oil for the entry of the engine. Lube oils for the pump and pressure receive with the spring gesture for the spring tension of the valve with the window will lift the valve off the sheet with the relief of the excessive pressure for the oil drain with the into the accessory housing with the oil pump and pan sump. Lube oil piston cooling oil manifold. Lubricating the piston cooling oil manifold is one piece casting with the cord attached to the manifold with the mount with the valve with the front end with the under of the accessory drive cover the connection. Tubes passing through the accessory drive cover to protect against the leakage by seal ring with the connection with the manifold discharge with the lube oil with the piston cooling passage pressure pump. The pressure purpose of the manifold to transfer the oil so lube oil pump piston with the cooling pump with the main bearing with the oil header and center engine. The piston cooling oil with the header of the pipes on each side of the crankshaft case with the just inside of the oil pan mounting flange. 7. Lube oil separator. The oil separator is mounted within the top of the auxiliary generator drive with the housing. The cylindrical housing contained securely with a held nest sugar screen element. This is an exploded view of the lube oil piston cooler pump. This shows your engine oil pressure for relief valve, valve guide, normal valve guide, relief holder, relief valve body. And that is your engine oil pressure relief valve. Here is pressure piston cooling oil inlet, lubricating oil inlet, lubricating oil relief valve. 4. Given governor driver staff, stub shaft oil line, lubricating piston oil, cooling oil, manifold right bank water inlet, harmonic balancer, accessory drive gear, scavenging oil suction line outlet, oil pan returning oil, lubricating piston cooling oil, manifold, oil separator. So there's your oil separator. Alright, the housing covered with the two opening with the connecting with the housing lead with the suction with the inch and with the blower suction hole draw with the oil vapor with the oil pan with the rear with the gear with the train housing oil separator oil vapor to continue collects oil in the mesh with the screen with the operating and element drive with the tube with the separator bottom of the flow with the rear training and with the turning of the oil pan. Operation scavenging oil system. The scavenging oil pump that travels with the oil pump reservoir through the scavenging oil stream with the force of the oil through the oil cleaner with the filter centrifuge. The oil cooler is supplied with the lube oil with the piston cooling open oil pump. The provision is made to ensure the oil supply with these pumps if the oil from the scavenging pump is restricted to the unusual conditions of either the filter or the cooler. Alright, 2. Lube oil piston cooling oils with the lube oil piston cooling oil pressure draw with the clean with the cool oil with the two fine mesh strain with the oil strainer housing through the common suction elbow through the top of the strain with the trainer elbow. Strainer housing with the discharge with the under the pressure separate piston with the cooling oil pump with the lube with the oil pressure for the discharge elbow with the manifold connection with the accessory gear cover. The piston cooling with the oil manifold delivers with the two piston with the cooling header with the pipe with the force over the out of the header through the piston cooling oil pumping P with the pipe with the direct with the steam oil and the housing with each of the piston pin carrier with the oil cooled through the piston pin crown. Compression ring section with the piston skirt lubricate with the piston pin with the bearing with the drains out with the piston with the holes with the carrier lube oil with the manifold delivers for the oil from the lube oil pressure main V-shaped oil header with the running through the left of the crankshaft of the oil line take with the measure of the oil manifold exert with the governor device with the gear stub shaft pressure oil with the V-shaped header with the flow with the down with the main bearing A with the A frame with the oil tubes lubricating with the main bearing with the from the through the drills passage with the carrying shaft with the connection rod with the bearings leak off the oil with the adjacent main bearing with the lubricating with the thrust bearings. Harmonic balancer, accessory drive gear lubricated with the oil flowing forward under the pressure of the number 1 bearing, journal through the radial with the drilling with the camshaft of the assigned with a similar drilling with a harmonic balancer accessory drive gear with allowing the pressure lubricating with the spring of the pack with the right hub bearing surface with the oil flowing through the end of the V shape with the bearing with a oil head with the lubricate with the bearing gear bearings with the camshaft with the blower drive with the brass with the camshaft bearings lubricated with the radial holes in each of the segment of the bearing with the front of the one over the bearing with each of the camshaft segment of the flow through the linear line with the rocker arm shaft staff shaft bushing through the drill patch with the rocker arm through the cam flower roller building bushing with the head hydraulic lasher adjustment leak of the camshaft with the rocker arm with the flow across the top of the cylinder head drain channel with adjusting the length of the engine vertical drain pipe with the channel with allowed with the oil drain into the oil pan oil within the upper idler gear with the subshaft lubricated with the auxiliary drive gear with the bushing with the flow with the boiler blower oil lines with the bearings and motor blower rotor gears. Low oil pressure, high oil suction shutdown with the power with the governor. That was the end of the page. Okay. Lubricating oil pressure. Adequate lubricating oil pressure maintained at all time with the engine running. On starting idle engine noted, but the oil pressure builds up almost immediately with the event with a cold oil pressure. But may rise the relief valve setting with approximately 50 pounds with the lubricating oil pressure with the adjustable with the operating pressure range determined with the manufacturer tolerance oil temperature oil dilution cover of course engine speed with the no specific overspeed operating pressure with the generally however the lubricating oil pressure between 16 and 25 pounds with the high speed 275 pounds 275 RPMs at 30 to 50 pounds full speed with the 80 to 835 RPMs. The minimum pressure is ideal with the 6 pound with a full speed of the 20 pounds operation pressure with the beast minimum with entirely satisfactory. For the event with the insufficient oil pressure for the shutdown failure between the governor with the automatically protect the engine with the cause of the stop of the piston with the cool the oil pressure no gauge with the piston cooling oil pressure provided with the piston cooling oil pressure determine a connection with the gauge 3/4 inch plugged opening with a pump discharge elbow the pressure for the piston cooling oil with the governor and the viscosity with the speed of the engine temperature for the oil wear with the pump of the parts of the piston cooling oil pressure is an idle engine speed at 275 RPMs at 3 psi full speed 15 psi with the oil pressure high the oil suction shutdown engines equipped with the electro-hydraulic or pneumatically hydraulic speed control governors which have low oil pressure, high low lube oil suction shutdown is part of the governor of the other either the condition with the oil pressure with the high suction governor will act with the shutdown engine will allow with a short time delay about 40 seconds of the engine speed with allow with the engine start with the time of the determined the cause with the trouble with the repeat with the setting of the engine feature with the shutdown and locate the trouble to shut down the attempt with the time delay void with the 425 RPM with the engine speed with the 8 with sheet speed. The shutdown will occur with the 2 second. The detail of the shutdown arrangement is outlined with the governor section. Oil pressure measured with the retain rear of the engine will contain this connection being made at the governor point of the governor. 6. Lubricating possible lubrication trouble is absence of the oil strain chamber. This may be covered the imperative of the scavenging system open drive valve with the failure of the scavenger may be due to the broken loose oil line connection with the cover of the air leak and the faulty scavenger pump with the clog with the suction screen with the low oil level. Lubricating oil level the pressure may be due to the relief valve of the form material of the valve C with the valve open with the broken out oil lines clog suction strainer with excessive bearing wear with the low viscosity faulty pump with the diluted oil insufficient oil or strainer housing failure of the oil pump. This may be due to the shear pump with the gear for the broken housing of the damaged gear of the dilution of the possible fuel with the oil the getting lubricating fuel line connection injector of the fuel manifold with the broken injector is defective and in such a condition has existed lubricating lube oil viscosity should be checked and lube oil may be contained by the water can be checked visually with the cylinder head the oil pan with the test of the sample with the oil excessive oil consumption. This may be caused by the oil leak with the broken the struck piston ring with the worn cylinder down the damage of the blower oil seal with clogged oil separator screen improper grade of oil clogged oil drain holes in the oil control rings and piston little or no lube or no oil consumption. This may be due to the water or fuel leaking into the oil. D. Your maintenance. Oil change. Engine lubricating oil should be drained with a filter plate within suction. Screen with the clean in interval for the outline maintenance instruction 1704 with the scheduled maintenance program before the oil is drain and viscosity should be checked with the indication fuel dilution indicating leaks contamination with allow with the correction with either add new oil general procedures provide container runoff line with the drain over the oil shut down the engine open the valve of the train with the housing with allow with the oil drain with the oil sump remove the plug with the end of the drain line with the open the drain valve with allow with the oil to drain out of the oil pan remove the pump of the suction strain with the screen with the filter clean cartridge with the green and clean Strain screen with the filter cleans, filter container with the recommended data with cleaning bulletin maintenance instructions 1706. Wash down top deck with oil pan filter housing with a UV fueling oil or kerosene. Drain off all the cleaning fluid. Wipe area free of cleaning excessive liquid by bonding edges of absorbent towels. Absorbent towels. Replace with the pipeline drain line as required with a closed valve with the necessary with the new renewed gaskets. Install with the cleaner strainer with the filter container with the new elements. Prepare system to receive the new oil, recharge engine lube oil with specification maintenance with the 1607, the latest revision, and oil from the square filling opening with the strainer housing. Note, be sure for the strainer housing with the internal drain valve with the cove with the sufficient oil will be retained with the housing supply with the lube and piston cooling oil pump strainer with the engine oil capacity may be found with the oil gauge with the given specification and with the section for pour liberal quantity of oils over the cylinder mechanism of the starting. Inspect engines prior to starting with the engine. Check the oil with the engine speed, idle speed with the engine oil level with the full mark on the belly oil to bring them level with the full mark and with the engine idle. Check with the oil viscosity. Oil viscosity should be checked as be specified in the maintenance manual program. Compare oil viscosity with a different interval with the same with the temperature with the compensator with the oil viscosity of the oil new clove with the check with the be kept with the oil pressure the replacement with the condition with the render with the unusable the dangerous recommended with the oil drain period. Oil having the viscosity of the chain with a greater extent, with it, if not renewed, with the result of the oil cooler clogging, strainer clogging, insufficient oil supply with a carbon buildup with a vulnerable places such as ring groove with the clearance with the result of the damage. Therefore, to provide protection with the engine oil system, the components should be carefully observed with the proper functioning. 3. Oil pressure relief valve. Disassemble the relief valve with inspect intervals. The intervals given the maintenance in 1704. The relief valve with the disassembled examine the valve and the stem and the end guide with the roughness galling of the valve stem that it appears good if the diameter minimum valve stem is 0.4925 of an inch. Check the square valve face if it should not exceed 2,000 of an inch. Total indicator reading the telescope with the gauge. Check valve with the inside of the diameter. Maximum inside diameter not exceeding 0.5025 of an inch. List load test valve spring compromise 3 and 3/8 should require at least 200 pounds to replace parts as required. Setting of the oil relief valve connected with the lube oil pressure to determine the maximum pressure of the lube oil pump is not set with the pressure for the specific dimension with the top of the valve guide with the top of the valve holder. The relief valve with the shutdown with the engine with the remove the relief valve cover, lock and loosen the lock nut. Apply the wrench to the flats of the valve guide position, top of the valve guide, 3/4 in the top of the valve holder with the tighten lock nut. When with the relief of the valve set with 3/4 in the dimension, allow the maximum lube oil with the pressure pump with the 60 psi to provide the efficient valve lift under the cool oil conditions. Under some of the conditions, weaken with the spring with the necessary with the increase with the ring station with the no condition of the top valve with the be less than half an inch with the top of the valve holder. Lube oil manifold pressure with the valve is determined by the applying of the pressure gauge with the pump discharge elbow. 4. Piston cooling pipe alignment with the alignment of the piston cooling oiling pipe. P pipe with the inlet holding piston check for the alignment of the shown figure 8.14. Small end gauge fits nozzle P pipe by bringing the piston to the bottom center of the should enter the end of the hole of the carrier with the return freely into the position but does not be used the bend with the P with the misalignment. The gauge will not free and freely with the carrier with the hole with the should be removed with the plate for the new one with the correct alignment. The piston cooling P pipe is very important under the engine and should be inspected carefully. Not only misalignment but condition with the nozzle with examine the rare ragged edges might be covered with oil to spray it instead of shooting out a stream. If your piston carrier with a particular must enterprise passage freely without binding piston cooling pipe P. Alright, a cleaning tool of the P pipe might be obtained under the under part 8087086. Oil pumps. Removal of the disassemble. Disconnect the oil line with the discharge elbow. With remove the discharge with the suction elbows. Remove the pump with the mounting bolts. Allow the pump to remove the clean outer area with the pump before disassembly. Remove this cap screw with the unscrew with the securing the outermost small cover with the almost with the main drive shaft. Holding that. Remove the counter pin and shaft nut. Washer. Remove the cap screw without the holes of the pump of the idle stationary. Remove the pump of the housing holders. Housing disassembly, remove the pump gear with the pump drive gear with the do not press with the drive shaft with the pump housing with the wardrobe key. The may be damaged enter with the driver shaft, bearing driver gears on one pump side with the driver shaft, the flange, the lube oil pump with the outside with the scavenging oil pump. Inspection of the rear, repair and clean all parts with the examine the significant signs of the failure of the gear teeth, the key ways with the inside with the pump, the surface of the clearance of the given specification, replace with the parts necessary for the clearance, indicate the pump, assemble the pump, the reverse gear, and general procedure outline. Item all above the replacement of the integral pump gears they must be replaced with mated part pairs. Lubricating oil chain for them should be removed to each of the oil chain for the cleaning as outlined in maintenance instruction 1706. I describe the unit description of the engine oil stream of the head of the oil seal with an addition with the seal ring, the oil under the pressure of the leak over the under the strain flange of the seal ring if it's not sealed properly with the damage, and when the strainers are replaced, the gear should be taken with the sealing and the surface free with the nicks and scratches for the seals of the ring with the condition, also with the oil patch for the seal of the are open clear. The oils can be checked with the engine, the oil speed with dilution with a slightly with a large wing nut holding strainer in place with a carefully raise the strainer further for the engine oil should leak out of the engine strainer flange. No oil. Engine should be shut down with the oil supply with the patches inspected clean with the air. Any air that might enter with the location of the discharge with the lubricating oil may cover the damage within normal oil pressure indicated. Your lube oil separator 7. Oil separator screen should be cleaned with the intervals maintenance instruction 1704. Oil separator screeners removed after first shutting down the engine, then remove the suction hose over the cover. After the cover is taken off the screen and remove the element is recommended with the maintenance 1706. Alright, 8. Pre-lubrication engine. For the pre-lubrication, newly installed overhead engines having been installed with a considerable length of the time before initial running of the necessary important practice of the procedure will alleviate for the engine loading with the unlubricated parts for the interval up until the normal lubing oil operations also starts. Also offers protection to see if the oil distributing of the engine is satisfactory. Oil supply with the external pump should be warm. Oil pressure is not exceeding 35 psi with a pipe diagram of the pressure for the test. Lube oil free oil cooling system may be detained with a requesting of the blueprint of valve 294. A time to pumping the oil through the engine inspection should be made with the rocker and with the camshaft of the main bearing with the soil of the oil with the reaching. These part of the camshaft should be rotated at least one revolution with the distributed of the oil with the one bearing of the moving part of the fishing with the oil should be pumped to ensure the reaching of all of the parts of the engine before starting with the engine with the parts of the lube quantity with the oil over cylinder mechanism each of the bank that apply with the new engine, and so much that the new engines have been filled with the running of the oil leaving the factory. Pre-lubrication of the such engine was occurred necessary. Note when engine is replaced during the mechanical breakdown, the important entire oil system, such as the oil filter, cooler filter set forth with the thoroughly cleaned before replacement engine. Reconditioned engine is put in the strip of the grease, and with the trouble, the more it may be evident in the cleaning of the engine if the others components are neglected. 9. Oil system information. Additional information oil system components are given in the latest provision maintenance instruction bulletins. These instructions cover the important parts of the scheduled maintenance program, the outline of the maintenance intervals, flushing instruction, cleaning information, lubrication specifications. Specification lubricating oil, lubricating oil to be for the engine with the SA number 40 oil with the corresponding specification given in the last revision of maintenance for 1607, and then goes over the your specifications, and it showed the water and then the lubricating oil. Chapter 9, cooling systems.